Do you ever wish that you could scrub your mind clean, remove it of all the junk and the rust and the noise and the garbage? Well, if so, there's some very simple information you can memorize that'll help you take care of that. And it is something that is very, very scientific. It's actually memorizing a little bit of science in order to give yourself something else to think about when the junk just gets too loud, and it will potentially remove the junk forever. That's coming right up. Hey there, this is Anthony Metivier from MagneticMemoryMethod.com, where we help mature learners of any age take mental adventures that unlock the full potential of your memory. And we do that with some very specific techniques that help you memorize information, primarily using an ancient technique called the memory palace, which is really better called location-based mnemonics, but some people call it the mind palace, some people call it the Roman room, then there's all kinds of oodles of other terminology. What matters though is that you understand the underlying principles behind the terms and you dive in and use them. And one of the things that I've enjoyed the most memorizing is Sanskrit from the Advaita or Advaita Vedanta tradition. So you'll hear it pronounced differently, and it's a ancient set of texts that talk about the ways and the procedures that you can remove worry, fear, and just chatter from your mind. And it makes sense because the things that you can select from the text to memorize are simply self-inquiry questions that scientifically direct you to figure out where exactly in your brain these concerns and this noise is coming from. And so this is very, very powerful. And you know, this has a sense of non-duality, as it's called, where some of these questions are getting you to demonstrate for yourself, and you can be totally skeptical of it, and in fact you're encouraged to be skeptical of it in the tradition itself, and find out that essentially none of those worries and concerns and that noise exist because they aren't anywhere to be found. So when you go looking for them, where are they? And so some of the great books that I've read on the matter are Happiness Beyond Thought and Evolving Beyond Thought by Gary Weber, also The Essence of Enlightenment and The Fire of Self-Knowledge by James SWARTZ. I'm now reading Inquiry into Existence by him, which is a commentary on some of these ancient texts, and I recently read his biography, Mystic by Default, which is really, really great as well. And I saw Tony Robbins recently, and it just dawned on me that he likely has had some training in this area, even though I've never heard him talk about it explicitly. He was mentioning being in a certain ashram in India, and it sounded a lot like it was probably premised on some Vedanta. So there's a lot of great teachers out there, and I don't intend to be a teacher of this at all, but rather just to share with you that I do this and that you can do it too. And it's just a very good memory exercise. So what are some of these things that I've memorized that have been so profound and impactful and helpful in terms of scrubbing the mind clean? Well, I first encountered a video by Gary Weber where he talks about Kirtan Kriya. This is a very simple entry-level thing. It's not the actual Upanishad texts or Vedanta texts in Sanskrit, but it's just Sata Nama. And it's very, very cool for giving yourself something to do in your mind when you're meditating. So instead of, sitting there meditating, trying to empty your mind or anything like this, or listening to music or having some app feed you sounds or anything like that, you produce the sounds. And then you give it a physical sensation with your fingers by saying and touching your fingers together with the notes. Sata Nama. Now, these sounds are said to have some kind of meaning, and I avoid all mysticism around this, so I didn't bother memorizing it, to be quite frank, what exactly these things are supposed to mean. But they're generally symbolizing that life is here, death is here, what comes into awareness will leave awareness, that sort of thing. But you do it like this, Sata Nama, and then you can actually reverse the fingers, so one is going forward and one is going backwards, that kind of thing. You can do both backwards, both forwards, whatever, and do that. And this is where I started, and it was really, really powerful, really neat sort of gateway drug. Because I noticed that actually the quality of my meditations changed, and changed quite profoundly. And there's a book that Gary Weber recommends that I went and read called How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain by Andrew NEWBERG. And one thing that's really great in there is it shows the scans of how your brain changes when you do these kinds of exercises. So, you know, you can give that a try, and it's very simple to memorize. You know, Sata Nama. I was thinking the other day, I was like, holy cow, this is almost like Satan's mom. Right? Just a simple image like that. Sata Nama. It doesn't have anything to do with Satan, though, I'm sure, given that it predates all that jazz by many, many years. In any case, that's one thing to do. And then the next thing, and this is again in Gary Weber's work, he provides some translations from something called the Ribhu Gita. And the Ribhu Gita is just selections that he's selected that give you these self-inquiry questions. Now, just in English, you could just pick up the habit, and I did this based on what I read in Happiness Beyond Thought by Gary Weber, is when you start to have thoughts that are intrusive and annoying, you can just say, to whom are these thoughts occurring, right? And that's a really powerful question, it turns out. It's very meditative. It's, you know, you don't have to stop and sit and meditate about it, but just say, to whom is this happening? And look for the person for whom it's happening. And you know, Sam Harris talks about this in Waking Up. You know, like, if you could turn around and look around at yourself, you would not have a head, right? And that he refers to a book about on having no head. And it's just a really interesting phenomenon. If you try to like look around at yourself and say, to whom are these thoughts occurring? To who, right? Like, it's very difficult to find where in space they're taking place, and you revolve around and you just see like, well, you can't even do that, right? Everything's just this screen, and this screen is everything. It's all you have, right? And so wherein this is happening, when you pinpoint it, you realize that it has no power over you, essentially. And you can just intervene on it very, very quickly. Even if you can only intervene on it for a few seconds at a time. That's where learning some of the Sanskrit and putting it into your meditation practice can be very, very helpful and powerful. So what that looks like is, like the first one that Gary Weber gives, it is, how do my thoughts behave? Are they useful? So that's a very powerful question, right? And the Sanskrit is Chittameva Mahadosham, Chittameva Hi Balaka, Chittameva Mahatmayam, Chittameva Mahana Sat. And that's just one station in a memory palace. Boom, done it in a couple seconds. And it's really, really powerful. And you go through some of the other questions, and when you start to practice them and you're dual processing the English and the Sanskrit, there's something very powerful that happens, because it's a brain exercise ultimately, and it's arguably changing the shape of your brain while you do it, and just creating a lot of calm, focus. And here's the big important thing, the reminder that your thoughts behave in ways that are not particularly useful a lot of the time, and then you can let them go. You just let them go, and you start to begin a process of letting go almost in advance of the thoughts arriving. So it's not as if I've completely cleared my mind and eliminated thought, but I certainly have done a lot in that direction, and it's very, very wonderful. And it helps with clarity, it helps with focus, it helps with memory, because you're much more attentive to the world around you and the information that's coming at you, because you're not lost in thought. You don't have these intrusive thoughts, and when the intrusive thoughts come, you just, hey, how does this thought behave? Is it useful? And then it's gone. Now, sometimes the answer, of course, is, hey, this is a very good thought, and it's very useful, so you use it, right? That's awesome, because sometimes there are useful thoughts. And then you can just say, well, to whom are these thoughts happening? And then you look around and you're like, wait, they're not happening to anybody. So there you go. It's pretty interesting. I hope that helps you out, and I hope that you'll give some Sanskrit meditation a try and memorize the actual stuff. I highly recommend Evolving Beyond Thought by Gary Weber and Happiness Beyond Thought by Gary Weber, and all the books that I mentioned today. They've been very tremendously impactful for me. And one of the cool things too is letting go of the outcome. And one of the great things that I like that I read and I've heard him say on some of his videos is James SWARTZ talking about how, you know, you're kind of going for enlightenment, I guess, when you do these kinds of things. And certainly I was had that in mind too many times when doing these practices. But he says, you know, if you ever think that you're enlightened, you should hang your head in shame, because you always were enlightened and you always will be enlightened. And consciousness pervades all things. All things are consciousness. And so the goal is to be free from the ignorance of what you really are and who you really are, and the consciousness that is everything, is you as well. And you know, there's some kind of ways that you could spin that as woo-woo talk and riddles and puzzles and philosophication and yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, really what I think it's getting at is, here's the world, and you're the only one who is the person experiencing your brain. And so of course everything is consciousness. It is the consciousness that your consciousness is perceiving. And it's just very self-evident. And that's what's cool about these questions and these techniques, is that you come to realize, because you're cleaning your brain, you're polishing your mind, day in and day out practicing this, that this is it. And that's all there is this. And it's really, really powerful to have that. And you realize that, you know, it's just now and there's no other time. And you start to feel much more connected to everything, because you're aware that you are not these thoughts, but there is a witness inside of you, that, and you are that witness that is seeing the thoughts and is observing the world in which those thoughts occur only to you, because you're the only one who can have them, because you're the brain, the chemical bath to which consciousness has granted an appearance, or through which consciousness is making an appearance. And to feel that, to really perceive it, to perceive it consistently and benefit from being connected to consciousness, these questions are a path. Now there may be other paths. There are stories of people who just burst into awareness and next level consciousness and all the fancy, goofy terms that you could give this kind of feeling. But this is a particular path, and there are others. You may have experienced those others in your life. Like, I can think back in my life playing bass on stage and just being totally connected with everybody in that room, with all the other musicians, and just looking over at the guitar player like we were one with the drummer and with the singer, because of course we were one. The only place it was happening was in this head, or at least I was the one perceiving it, because this brain was the only one that could perceive it as I was able to perceive it, as was every other brain perceiving it in the way that only they could perceive it. But the level of awareness is deeper and richer according to your connection in the moment and in the flow and in the activity. And that's why these an example of concerts is really quite powerful, because I think we've all been in one where we felt like we are at one with the entire crowd, with the musicians on the stage, with the people at the bar, with the people moving around in the room, boom, 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 boom. Now just imagine what that would be like if almost every minute of your day felt that connected. This is the path, and this is why I do it. Thank you for watching this video. This has been Anthony Metivier from MagneticMemoryMethod.com. Come visit me at MagneticMemoryMethod.com if you want memory training. You can take the free course at MagneticMemoryMethod.com/YT. The link's down below. Subscribe to this channel if you aren't already. And until we have a chance to speak again, I hope you will feel free by asking yourself, how do your thoughts behave? And are they useful? And come and make them useful at MagneticMemoryMethod.com. Take care. Bye-bye.